All right, welcome to week 16. The last week of the semester is here. Woo-hoo! This week we're dealing with chapter 14 with the formulation and conduct of American foreign policy, which is actually a 16-week course that I teach. So if you see it on the schedule at some point, please consider signing up for it if you need an elective. The authors begin this chapter with stories illustrating the different perspectives of Donald Trump's executive order banning immigration from certain countries. While some supported the ban on national security grounds, others argued that it arbitrarily denied people entry to into the country simply because of their country of origin. Now, this story demonstrates both the power of the president to control our border and the potential limitations on that power. So, what are the consequences of using a travel ban to keep, the bad people out? For much of our history, foreign policy wasn't a particularly important issue. Much of the nation's energy was inwardly directed in basically conquering and expanding and exploring and populating the interior of the country. The nation's rise as a superpower in the aftermath of World War II really drew the U.S. into a leadership position in the world and basically caused us to pursue our national interests and our national security, far from our borders. Okay, so, and today, of course, a reasonable person might wonder whether or not we're still occupying a leadership position in the world. This chapter commits a considerable amount of space to describing the principal agencies related to foreign policy, particularly the Department of State and the Defense Department. Another important institution in the foreign policy establishment is the National Security Council, which I kind of jokingly describe as, foreign policy training wheels. When the National Security Council process is working, presidents, when they have to make decisions, on a particular issue, are generally going to be presented with a range of acceptable options on any particular issue. In other words, presidential advisors keep the president coloring within the lines and clearly try to advise the president as to what will or might happen if a president chooses a particular course of action. Of course, in order for any advisory process to work, a president has to be advisable. With the current administration, willingness to take advice, seems to be the exception rather than the norm. The relationship between the president and Congress is an especially important component of the foreign policy process. Presidents have greater authority to act without congressional consent in foreign policy, but Congress retains oversight authority, and careful presidents work hard to ensure to keep Congress in the loop. I'm sure we can explore the connection between the text and current events over the course of the week on, whether that's what's going on today. Congress has some legal tools that are rarely employed but can be very important in the conduct of foreign policy. Congress, particularly the House, has the power of the purse, and that means Congress can control what happens in foreign policy through the appropriations and authorization process of fiscal policy. The Senate has extensive foreign policy authority, particularly its advise and consent power as it relates to key appointments and treaties. And Congress, not the president, has the power to declare war. The challenge, of course, is that divided government can paralyze Congress's capacity to act in ways to oppose the president, particularly when the executive branch and the Senate are controlled by one party. And we can talk about why having the Senate controlled by the same party as the president is different than having the House controlled by the president of the same party. The remainder of the text deals with the tools of foreign policy, which really boil down to diplomacy, military force, or money. The primary instrument of diplomacy is the State Department, and different administrations place a higher or lower priority on diplomacy. And as a result, the Secretary of State has a higher or lower profile in terms of how foreign policy is conducted. Military force is an important tool of statecraft. The United States has by far the most powerful military. We've spent by far more on our defense budget than any, basically the rest of the world combined for many, many years. The temptation to use military force in response to threats that might be dealt with by other means creates a problem known as Maslow's hammer. For the carpenter whose only tool is a hammer, every problem is a nail. The use and the threatened use of military force makes it appear that you're strong, but in fact impose high costs uh, on their use. And we really should, be in the business of using force as a last resort. The authors also discuss the importance of soft power, which involves the countries leveraging the appeal of their country and their culture through good works. We can certainly discuss the importance of soft power and the effects that the current administration's various policies have had on American soft power, which basically again is relative to people's perception, foreign people's perceptions of the United States. So this is the last week of the semester. Everything is due, everything that is outstanding. I will take assignments late for partial credit. The final opens the first day of finals week and runs through Thursday. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking the class, and I appreciate all of your hard work. I hope you enjoyed the course, and I wish you good luck in all your future endeavors.